everybody, it's Caroline Strawson here, multi-award winning international therapist and coach, really obsessed with helping you heal the trauma, because let's face it, it is the trauma of narcissistic abuse, using a whole host of integration of therapies and tools such as brain spotting, EMDR, RTT, and polyvagal and parts therapy too. So if you're new to my channel, massive warm welcome to you. I'm really pleased to see you. And if you are new and you haven't hit like and subscribe, then I'd really love you to do that, because I try and put out 2 videos each week just to really help you realize that you're not on your own, that there is hope and it can get better. I really want to help you have what we call in positive psychology post-traumatic growth, which is higher level living because of the trauma, because actually going through the trauma of all this is highlighting a lot of inner wounds that were already there. And I've done lots of other videos around all of that. But today I want to talk about, can you actually heal a narcissist? Now, I get asked this a lot. I have a massive group on Facebook called Heal the Trauma of Narcissistic Abuse. In the notes below, you will see the link. So please come along and join that group. I'd love to see you in there. It's free and it's private, where again, you will see you're not on your own in this. You're not crazy, I promise you. As much as you may think you are right now, I know you're not. And I want you to know that I believe you and I want to validate your experience of what you are going through right now. But can a narcissist actually heal? Well, I think really for us to answer that question, we really need to understand what exactly a narcissist is. Now, in our society today, it's a hugely overused term. You know, everybody's ex is a narcissist, you know, political figures are narcissists. And we use this term really frequently when actually what this does is damage to those who are genuine victims of narcissistic abuse. And there is a difference between people having narcissism, narcissistic traits, and then actually narcissistic personality disorder, because it is a mental health disorder. It's a personality disorder. We all have a certain amount of narcissistic traits, all of us. But narcissistic personality disorder is a very specific personality disorder. And I'll talk about really why we shouldn't even be calling it a personality disorder in a moment. But it's actually listed in the DSM, which is the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders from the American Psychological Association. And to diagnose, so if you could, and that's the key question here, if you could get somebody to think that maybe they had narcissistic personality disorder, therein lies the problem, because said no narcissist ever. But if they thought that, and they actually could go and get a diagnosis from a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, they will use this manual. And in that manual to diagnose NPD, you actually have a list of 9 traits. And these are things like a feeling of grandiosity, no empathy, you know, feeling superior to others. And there's a whole host, there's 9 different traits listed in this DSM. And to be diagnosed as someone with having narcissistic personality disorder, you actually have to have 5 of those 9 traits. Now, someone may have 4 or 3 or 2, which is why really it's so difficult in our society, because on the surface, what can look like somebody is narcissistic, they don't actually have narcissistic personality disorder. And it is on a spectrum. So you could have somebody with maybe 2 or 3 narcissistic traits coming out as things like immaturity, looking like they're projecting anger upon you, and you're going to call them a narcissist. Whereas actually, a lot of all of this, both narcissistic personality disorder and narcissistic traits, depending on what they are, really all boil down to childhood trauma. So narcissistic personality disorder is actually on a spectrum. So you could have somebody who has 5 of those traits. Equally, you can have somebody who has 9 of those traits. And either or, they are then classified as a narcissist. And there's such a difference. I wish in society we would call people narcissistic as opposed to a narcissist, because a narcissist really should be for those who actually have narcissistic personality disorder. And let me tell you, as a victim of narcissistic abuse from somebody who had narcissistic, or has still, because you don't get rid of it, narcissistic personality disorder, it really is debilitating. You wouldn't have recognized me, you know, 10, 11 years ago. It really broke me. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, depression, anxiety, self-harm, which were all symptoms of the trauma of narcissistic abuse. So how exactly does narcissistic personality disorder form? because as yet there is no research at all out there to suggest that there is a genetic link. You are not born a narcissist. You're not born with narcissistic personality disorder. It is created in childhood. Now, people who are magnets to narcissistic personality disorder, are what we call codependent. And here is where it starts to get a little bit complicated, because actually a narcissist is also codependent. So what exactly is codependency? Well, it is a total lack of self. It's those deep inner subconscious beliefs of not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, and always looking externally then to get that validation and approval. Now, what we classify as a codependent is somebody obviously who can potentially recognize that. They're a people pleaser. They will be the ones to do that certain behavior to prove to others, I'm worthy, I'm good enough. Now, someone with narcissistic personality disorder, and this is where it's almost wrong in calling it a personality disorder, because when we start to talk about mental health disorders and personality disorders, really these are all parts of that person trying to protect an inner child wound. So when I do parts therapy with my clients, we talk a lot about that sense of self, the who you are, and then we have these protector parts that come up to really protect that inner wound. And in this case, both from a codependent and from a narcissist perspective, those inner wounds could be those feelings of not being good enough. And this will often come from childhood. So you will find a narcissist may have come from a childhood of neglect or abuse, and they will often have both of their parents. One will be a narcissist, one will be a codependent. So the codependent, because they also have this lack of self, will shower love and affection onto that narcissist. And obviously that's when NPD gets formed, and they will then have this expectation, this is how I need to be treated all of the time, because the other parent who is a narcissist, who has narcissistic personality disorder, could be neglectful, even abusive too. So the child in the middle of all of this sees one parent showering love and thinks, that's what I want. Sees the other parent being neglectful or abusive, maybe pitting them up against siblings as well. And the inner wounds of that child will think, I never want to feel like this from, say, my mother or father who is a narcissist, because obviously that makes me feel not good enough. That's the wound. This is how I want to feel. I need people to keep showing me, because that at least makes me feel a little bit better, because it's not actually highlighting that inner wound that the other parent has formed as well. So that then means that person potentially, and again, there's no research to say why does someone become a codependent and why does someone become a narcissist. There isn't anything out there yet to suggest, because both of the starting points could be exactly the same. You could have one narcissistic parent and one codependent parent with two children, and you can have one child that becomes a narcissist and the other child becomes a codependent. So you can see there's no evidence as to why that child then goes down the narcissistic personality disorder route or down the codependency route. However, both of them, say in this scenario of a family, have a total lack of self. But the codependent becomes this people pleaser by being the person to please others, whereas the narcissist expects others to please them. Both are very wounded. Both are suffering from childhood trauma. And again, when I say trauma in lots of my other videos, trauma is just overwhelmed to your system. It doesn't have to be these massive traumas. It can be just the meaning you attach to various events with how your parents are behaving towards you, where you think they're behaving like this because of me. And that starts to create those beliefs. So there you then get that narcissist. And because of their deep inner wounds, they will have these hugely strong protector parts going, I never want you to feel the pain of what you felt as a child having that narcissistic parent. So I am going to project right out of there. This is who we're going to be. This is when we start to talk about ego. And ego is actually, again, a misunderstood term, because we see potentially narcissists entering into a room and you can almost think, wow, look at their ego, because they're acting like they are look at me kind of person. But actually the ego is that false sense of self. The ego then for a narcissist are these protector figures going, right, we're never going to feel that inner wound, so this is how we're going to behave. And it's like the narcissist has these guards in front of these inner wounds that they have to project out onto others. They don't almost have that personality. So when we call it a personality disorder, they don't know what a personality is because they've never had that healthy sense of self. all the protector parts of that narcissist knows is, we are going to stand in front, absolutely never going to feel this inner wound. The moment, and maybe you can relate to this if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, the moment that narcissist thinks you are then knowing what they're like, maybe finding them out, wow, their protector parts stand up even further, project out even more. That's when their abuse and their aggression can get even more so. It is really specific narcissistic personality disorder. And you may have had people in your life and you think, and you've called them a narcissist, but actually there's a whole host of other things that could mean people have got protector parts. The codependent will have these protector parts as well, because the inner wound of a codependent is also, I'm not good enough. So they will then have protector parts of, I'm going to please you and make sure that you never ever aggravate the wound of not being good enough. I'm going to procrastinate all of my life and self-sabotage in my life, because then it stops me going into a situation where I potentially might not feel good enough. And that's what the codependent will do. Sadly, the person with narcissistic personality disorder doesn't even recognize these protector parts are that strong with someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. They don't even recognize that actually there's a wounded person beyond all of that. So I'm not here to say that I don't understand the pain in some respects of someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. However, there is no research out there to suggest right now that we can cure somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. Now, that doesn't mean if someone presents with narcissistic personality disorder and has maybe addictions or other issues that we can't potentially help these other issues. However, as a therapist, I'm very mindful about treating anybody that potentially has narcissistic personality disorder, because everything is a false sense. Everything is about getting that narcissistic supply so they never feel those inner wounds. So that's why you could see someone who is narcissistic personality disorder maybe acting like they've got empathy, but they don't have empathy. They are doing that and playing a role to get that supply. Now, here is where we start to misdiagnose and we start to call people narcissists when they're not. Because if you imagine childhood trauma and other events that can happen in your childhood, that doesn't mean you're suddenly going to get narcissistic personality disorder. You know, I treat many people who don't have narcissistic personality disorder, but might present as very, very angry. They may absolutely, in those moments when maybe somebody has triggered their inner wounds, they're going to get a protector part coming up and will absolutely project out. They might have immaturity. They might feel really, really angry. They might present in lots of different ways. That does not mean that they have narcissistic personality disorder. They might actually have narcissistic traits because that's how it can present, but actually there is a difference between that, and the difference is somebody who has narcissistic traits and childhood trauma, they can recognize that, and it's over a time period. A narcissist, a true narcissist, will never do that. They may for a period of time, because that's when they're going to get their narcissistic supply, but someone who has genuine narcissistic personality disorder will not change. Now, that doesn't mean I don't feel incredibly sorry for a narcissist, so to speak, because I do, because they're never going to know what true love and connection is, because they are that much of a wounded soul. And that doesn't mean that I think, oh, I really, really want to help them and I can't and I won't. It means that I simply am unable because their protector parts are so strong. You cannot get beyond them. That is the nature of narcissistic personality disorder. Somebody else who has suffered with, say, childhood trauma may be presenting with this anger and emotion, but they recognize that. And maybe when they go to therapy, they will facilitate change. They may have presented with some narcissistic traits, but they recognize they have an issue. Their projection is of their wounds, but they are not a narcissist. A narcissist will not change. And this is why, sadly, so many people, when they say my ex is a narcissist, and then all of a sudden they seem to be healing and getting on with their life, somebody else who has had a genuine victim of narcissistic personality disorder will be thinking, wow, they're saying their ex is a narcissist and they seem to be healing and getting on with their life. I'm really struggling here. Now remember, the codependent is a magnet to a narcissist. The codependent doesn't feel good enough inside. So what do you think that codependent is going to think and feel? Seeing somebody else saying that they're getting on with their life after a narcissist, and they're watching on thinking, I'm not, I'm stuck. It's going to send them even further down that regulatory ladder, even more into freeze, even more into a trauma response, really, really scratching that scab off of, I mustn't be good enough. Because if I was good enough, then I'd be getting on with my life. Narcissistic abuse is an insidious form of psychological abuse. Our brain physiologically changes. Don't worry though, doesn't mean it stays like that. We can reverse all of these things. So I see a lot of people on Facebook, online, calling out their exes or parents or friends and saying they're a narcissist. Please stop doing that. You are not doing a service to those genuine victims of narcissistic abuse. That does not mean you haven't been abused. Okay, and I want to be really clear on that. It does not mean if you have had a horrendous time with a partner that there hasn't been abuse. But I'm talking very specifically about narcissistic abuse, narcissistic personality disorder. Someone can abuse you because they are projecting childhood trauma onto you. It does not mean that they have narcissistic personality disorder, because if they then recognize they are doing that, and again, it's all about different parts of us, these protector parts, then it means that they can go to therapy and we can start to work on healing those inner wounds so those protector parts can step aside. That does not happen with a narcissist, okay? There is no evidence to suggest any of that. That does not mean that I wouldn't want to help somebody like that. It means I simply can't. I can't help somebody who doesn't recognize they need to be helped. If they recognize, so if you're watching this and thinking, well, my ex says he's a narcissist, and you know that's what we think he or she is, and he's having therapy now and seems to be getting better, they would not have had narcissistic personality disorder. That would not have been the case. We would probably be more likely to be talking about trauma. And again, this is the misunderstanding in the world about narcissistic personality disorder, okay? Because sometimes you might go to see a therapist and you might explain maybe the traits of your partner or ex-partner, and they might say, yes, they've got narcissistic personality disorder as such, okay? And I get, we want to validate what you've been experiencing, but the potential is they may or may not have that. It could just be childhood trauma. Narcissistic personality disorder, they project onto you. They will do smear campaigns. They will have flying monkeys. They will leave you feeling crazy. They will leave you feeling like it's your fault. Now, again, people can project that onto you even if there's childhood trauma, but there is a real difference between narcissistic personality disorder and just somebody who's suffering with childhood trauma. If you're in a relationship right now and you're questioning whether or not they are a narcissist, I've got a quiz below, telltale signs of the narcissist. Go and take that. But equally, look at, do you have moments within your relationship where they are really, really trying? They are trying to make it work. And when I say that, I don't just mean little snippets, which we call hoovering, the back and forth. I mean over long periods of time. And then maybe they get a trigger, they react and project onto you. A narcissist isn't like that. A narcissist will really try and have that control, that manipulation. And the moment that the narcissist starts to feel they're losing that supply, they are going to come back at you. And again, because the protector parts stand up even more and think, oh, we're feeling that wound inside. No, no, no. And at all costs, that is exactly what a narcissist will do. At all costs, nobody can see those wounds. Nobody can aggravate them. But if you try to tell that to someone with narcissistic personality disorder, on average, they will not hear, they will not listen to that, because it will be your fault. They are projecting that out onto you. And again, there are some people online that are self-confessed narcissists. They are diagnosed with this. And if you go and follow some of those, they will say the same as me. They can't be cured. There are things that potentially they could do to try and live a better and more connected life. But those that have actually come out and said, I have narcissistic personality disorder, they don't have connected relationships. It's all about a facade. It's about projection all of the time. So I really wanted to do this video to clear this up. Please stop calling your ex, your parent, your friend, your co-worker a narcissist. say they have narcissistic traits, okay, unless you've looked and over a longer period of time, they are ticking the boxes of 5 of these 9 traits listed in the DSM, okay, because it's really damaging then for people who are genuine victims of narcissistic abuse, because if they see you getting better, you healing, then you are actually sending a whole host of other people further down into a trauma response, because if they see you getting better because you've changed your behavior, and then all of a sudden your partner is changing their behavior and they see that you're living happily ever after, so to speak, then just imagine what that person looking and saying, I must be doing something wrong. They're right, I'm not good enough. And you're just actually cementing even more to somebody what they're already deeply thinking about themselves. So let's stop misdiagnosing people. Let's get really, really clear about the difference between narcissism and narcissistic traits and narcissistic personality disorder. There is no cure for narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic traits could be projecting childhood trauma. Somebody who is angry might be projecting onto you some childhood trauma. And when I say childhood trauma, that doesn't just mean abuse in childhood. That could mean simply things of how your parents acted and the meaning that you attach to things for you maybe to not feel good enough or not worthy. So again, I hope that's really helped explain to you, because you might have a friend that's also saying, my ex is a narcissist, and they seem to be getting on with their life, making you feel even worse. I pretty much guarantee it, their ex isn't a narcissist. Narcissistic traits, maybe they might be an asshole as well, but the likelihood is if people really can heal and recover very quickly after a relationship, they've not been the victim of narcissistic abuse. It's not to say they haven't had a tough time or even been in an abusive relationship, but I want to be really clear here. Narcissistic personality disorder is a very specific personality disorder. And again, it shouldn't really be called personality disorder because there is no personality as such. It's pure projection, pure protection, protectors projecting out. So I hope that's really helped you understand a little bit. And for those of you who are genuine victims of narcissistic abuse, I believe you. Just because other people are saying all of this, please don't let it negate your experiences, because I know firsthand what it is like. I know firsthand what it is absolutely like to be at rock bottom coming out of a relationship with a narcissist. And I want to validate your experience. I believe you. And just because others may not believe you, or because others are using this term incorrectly, I want you to know that that does not invalidate your experience. But I hope that's gone to explain a little bit about the difference, and that narcissists cannot be cured. Not because we don't want to help everybody. If I could help, absolutely I would. But you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. So if you're with someone who's saying they want to be helped, just make sure they're not saying that to get that supply. But if they are genuinely wanting to get help, they are not a narcissist. There is underlying issues there, and there is a real difference with all of that. So I hope I've explained. Again, if you haven't liked and subscribed to my channel, please do so. Come and join my free and private Facebook group, Heal the Trauma of Narcissistic Abuse. Love to see you in there so that I can help support you even more so to heal that trauma, because it is, of narcissistic abuse.